I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, don't close them if you're driving, but, use your imagination. I want you to picture a courtroom.
Okay.
But I don't want you to picture the sterile, fluorescent-lit, wood-paneled rooms we see on TV procedurals today.
No. This is something else entirely.
Picture something that feels and smells more like a crowded theater in 1921. It's Versailles, France.
I'm with you.
The air is thick with cigarette smoke, the scent of cheap perfume mixing with the sweat of hundreds of people packed into a space meant for, dozens.
And it's not just the smell, it's the noise. It's this kinetic energy of the room. We are talking about an audience that treated a murder trial like the premiere of a blockbuster movie.
It's incredible.
You had aristocrats rubbing shoulders with factory workers. You had people bringing picnic lunches, baguettes, and wine to eat in the gallery while a man's life hung in the balance.
And the guest list was absolutely insane. We aren't talking about legal clerks or, bored journalists or concerned family members.
So this was the A-list.
We're talking about the cultural elite of Paris. Rudyard Kipling was there?
Rudyard Kipling, yeah. The novelist Colette was sitting in the front row taking notes.
Maurice Chevalier, the biggest singer in France, arguably one of the biggest stars in the world at the time, was in the audience.
It's just wild to even imagine. The French government literally had to run a special train. They dubbed it the Landru Special, just to ferry the spectators from Paris to Versailles every single morning.
Because the demand was that high.
The demand was that high. It was the hottest ticket in town.
It creates such a jarring image, doesn't it? We tend to view crime, and specifically serial murder, as this shadowy, hidden act.
Right. Something that happens in the dark, in the silence, in the privacy of a basement or a back alley.
But history and the massive stack of sources we're looking at today shows us something very, very different. Murder is often a public performance.
It's his theater.
It's theater. And in 1921, Henri Désiré Landru was the lead actor.
He was the star of the show. And that is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into the theater of crime.
And to do that, we have to pull from a really eclectic mix of sources. This isn't just, a single biography.
Not at all. Sounds like a strange cocktail, doesn't it? We have an encyclopedia entry on World War I espionage. We have a deep historical analysis of Landru, the so-called Bluebeard of Gambais.
And on top of that, a dense academic paper on Fyodor Dostoevsky and the rise of what was called the Boulevard Press.
There's finally a massive sociological study titled Serial Murder and Media Circuses. So, Dostoevsky, WWI spies, a French serial killer.
It sounds totally disconnected.
It does. But the mission today is to connect those dots. We're going to look at how the secret wars of 1914 created the perfect cover for a predator, how the rise of tabloid journalism turned tragedy into entertainment.
And how the media doesn't just report on killers, it actively shapes their narratives and sometimes, as we'll see, disastrously interferes with the investigations.
And it all anchors on this one man, Landru.
He's the prototype.
He is the blueprint for the modern celebrity killer. But before we get to the man himself or the performance in the courtroom, we have to set the stage.
And the stage is the First World War.
Right. Because you cannot understand how Landru got away with murdering 11 people in roughly 4 years without understanding the atmosphere of France between 1914 and 1918.
That source we have, the one from the 1914-1918 online encyclopedia on espionage, it paints a picture that, for me, goes way, way beyond the trenches.
It does.
Usually when I think of WWI, I think of the Western Front. I think of mud, trenches, mustard gas, the stalemate. But this source talks about the secret war. What does that actually mean for a civilian living in Paris?
It means that the war wasn't just fought on the battlefield. It was fought in the mind. The source describes a society that was just consumed by spy mania.
Spy mania.
Yeah. You have to realize that intelligence services like the British MI6 or the French Deuxième Bureau were really expanding and kind of finding their footing during this time.
So this is all pretty new.
It's very new on this scale. But for the average person, this manifested as a pervasive, suffocating paranoia. The enemy wasn't just across no man's land. The enemy was everywhere.
So neighbors suspecting neighbors. The person you buy your bread from.
Precisely. The source notes that the warring societies began to recognize their own spies as heroes, but anyone else, anyone who looked a bit different or acted a bit secretive, was a potential saboteur.
So there's this intense atmosphere of suspicion.
Intense. It was a time of tapping radio communications, intense censorship, and just constant fears of sabotage. The entire state apparatus, the police, the investigators, the bureaucrats, was entirely focused on one thing.
Finding foreign agents.
Finding foreign agents. And this is a crucial point. If you are a police commissioner in Paris in 1916, your priority isn't a missing person case. It's not even on your radar.
No, your priority is catching a German spy who might be blowing up a munitions factory.
Exactly. And that tunnel vision is what created the opportunity. While this secret war raged, a massive domestic vacuum opened up. Think about the demographics for a second.
The men are gone.
Millions of them are at the front. The mortality rate is horrific. So back home in Paris, what do you have? You have a sudden, tragic surge in widows.
And not just widows, right? The source mentions women who are alone. That's a broader category.
It is. It could be women who are legally separated or women whose husbands are technically missing in action but not confirmed dead. It's a population of lonely, often financially vulnerable women seeking stability in a chaotic world.
And you have a police force that is completely overwhelmed with tracking deserters and spies.
Utterly overwhelmed.
Oh.
So if a woman disappears in 1916, what's the assumption? It's not foul play?
And no, the assumption is maybe she moved, or maybe she ran off with someone, or, frankly,
We don't have time to look for her.
we have bigger problems.
Bigger problems. It's the perfect storm. The chaos of war acts as a camouflage.
Exactly. And into this chaos steps Henri Désiré Landru.
The man himself.
So let's talk about Landru. Who was this guy? Because looking at the source material and the photos included in the biography, he doesn't fit the profile of a terrifying monster. He looks almost comical.
He does. Physically, he was quite unremarkable, bordering on the absurd. He was born in Paris in 1869 to a modest, respectable family.
Okay.
His father was a furnace stoker, which is deeply ironic given what comes later, and his mother was a seamstress.
And he was religious, at least for a time.
He was actually a subdeacon in the church for a while.
A subdeacon, that implies a level of piety, or at least the appearance of it.
The appearance of it is key. He was obsessive, organized. He worked as an accountant, a furniture dealer, a cartographer. He had all his legitimate-seeming jobs.
But beneath that veneer of respectability.
He was a career criminal.
Yeah.
Before the murder started, he had a long, long record of fraud. He would set up fake factories, take money from investors, and then just vanish. He was a swindler, a con man.
But the thing that stands out in all the descriptions is his charm. The sources say he had a hypnotic charm.
They do.
And you look at the pictures, he was bald, short, he had this big rust-colored beard that made him look like a garden gnome, and yet
He seduced hundreds of women. And seduce is the key word here, but we need to define it very carefully. It wasn't just romantic seduction.
no, it was transactional.
Completely. The source material highlights that Landru wasn't killing out of bloodlust in the way we think of someone like Jack the Ripper, who acted on these sudden, violent impulses.
Right, this wasn't about the act of killing itself.
No, Landru was killing for finance.
It was a business model. A really, really gruesome business model.
It really was. He treated murder like an accounting problem. He was liquidating assets. The women were the assets.
Let's walk through the modus operandi, because this is where the boulevard press and the classifieds come in. How did he find his victims?
He utilized the technology of his day, the newspaper classifieds. He would place Lonely Hearts advertisements in papers like Le Journal.
And these ads were just perfect bait. I have one of the texts here from the notes. It reads, widower with 2 children, aged 43, comfortable income, affectionate, serious, and moving in good society, desires to meet widow with a view to matrimony.
It sounds perfect, doesn't it? It checks every single box for a woman in that position. Comfortable income offers security. Affectionate offers love.
Yeah.
Serious implies he isn't a player.
If you are a war widow in 1915, struggling to buy coal for the winter, this ad looks like a lifeline.
It's everything you're looking for. And he received hundreds of replies.
And this is where the accountant in him comes out. The source mentions a carnet, a small black notebook that played this huge role later in the investigation.
The notebook is key. He didn't just read these letters, he processed them. He sorted the women into categories like a spreadsheet.
What were the categories?
The notebook had columns, he labeled them: no money, probable assets, or reserve.
Reserve, like inventory in a warehouse.
Exactly. He was mining these women. He would initiate a correspondence, present himself as a respectable man, often using aliases. He had dozens of aliases, but Diard and Fremier were his favorites.
So he'd meet them, Charm them.
charm them, and then slowly, methodically isolate them from their families and friends.
And once he had secured their trust, and more importantly, access to their furniture, their savings, their bank accounts, he would make the move.
He would take them to the country.
Yeah.
First to a rented villa in Vernouillet, and later to the infamous Villatric in Gambais. These were isolated houses, surrounded by high walls or dense foliage.
Perfect for privacy.
The perfect place to make someone disappear.
There is a detail from the source regarding the train travel to these villas that I found absolutely chilling. It's such a small thing, but it says everything about his psychology.
You're talking about the tickets.
Yes, the train ticket.
It's the economy of the murder. When he took these women to the villa by train for what was supposed to be a romantic getaway or, a prelude to marriage.
He would buy a return ticket for himself.
A round trip.
And for the woman.
A single ticket. One way.
Oof. That is just, it's so cold. It's so calculated.
It's practical in his mind. Why waste a few francs on a return ticket that he knows with absolute certainty won't be used?
It speaks to a total lack of empathy.
A complete commodification of the victim. They weren't people to him. They were line items on a ledger. Expenses to be minimized.
Let's put some names to these numbers because the source lists 11 official victims, 10 women, and 1 boy. We should humanize them before we get to the gruesome parts of the story.
Absolutely. The first victim was a woman named Jean Couchet.
Okay.
She was a seamstress, a widow, 39 years old. She had a 17-year-old son named André. Landru, posing as Diard, promised to marry her.
And he roped the son in, too.
He did. He even promised to help André get a government job, which was a huge draw for a young man during the war. It was a path to security.
So he leveraged the son's future to trap the mother.
That's exactly what he did. They moved into the villa in Vernouillet in early 1915, and then silence.
They just vanished.
Simply vanished. The neighbors later reported seeing thick, acrid smoke billowing from the chimney. But again, it's wartime. People are burning all sorts of things. No one investigated.
And that brings us to the stove. The oven at Gambais, it became the central prop of the entire case.
It did. The cuisinière, as it was called in French. When the police finally investigated the villa years later, they didn't find bodies. They found ash.
Right.
And in that ash, the forensic analysis identified 4 kilograms of calcined bone debris.
And 47 human teeth.
47 teeth. That's undeniable evidence.
It is, but it's also fragmentary. It's not a body. And that distinction is crucial for what happened at the trial. No body, no crime. Or so he hoped.
He clung to that.
But how did he finally get caught? If the police were so busy with spies and deserters, what tripped him up after all that time?
It wasn't the police. Not really. It was the persistence of the families.
The family started talking to each other.
Exactly. The sister of one victim, a woman named Madame Lacoste, and the friend of another victim started comparing notes. They didn't know each other initially, but through a series of coincidences, they realized their missing loved ones had both been engaged to a very similar-looking man who had, suddenly disappeared.
So they did the detective work themselves.
They did. They went to the police with a physical description, but the real breakthrough happened by sheer dumb luck. It's the Rue de Rivoli sighting.
Walk us through that.
So it's 1919 now. The war is over. A friend of one of the victims is walking down the Rue de Rivoli, a very busy shopping street in Paris.
Okay.
She spots a man buying porcelain, and he looks exactly like the man her friend was engaged to.
Just a chance encounter on a crowded street.
A 1 in a million chance. She follows him, she gets his address, she alerts the police, and that was it.
And when they finally arrested him at his apartment in Paris, where he was living with his actual wife and children, by the way.
Which is just another layer of this whole thing.
Yes. They found the notebook.
The carnet. It was the smoking gun. It listed 283 women he had contacted. And crucially, it contained a coded list of the 11 victims.
Coded how?
It recorded the exact dates they vanished and the financial gains he made from each one. It wasn't a diary of murder. It was a ledger of death.
But Landru didn't confess, did he?
Never. Not once. And this is where the theater really begins. He was incredibly arrogant. He refused to speak about the women.
What was his official line?
His line was, "I am Landru, that doesn't prove I'm a murderer." He claimed the women were his secret business, implying he was perhaps a white slaver or sending them to South America. Anything but murder.
Anything to create reasonable doubt.
He dared the police to find the bodies.
Which, aside from the teeth and the bone fragments, they couldn't do.
Exactly. And that ambiguity, that lack of a corpse, paved the way for the trial to become an absolute spectacle.
So let's move to Section 3, the birth of the media circus. Because the source material suggests that the Landru trial in 1921 was a watershed moment. It wasn't just a trial, it was a cultural event.
It absolutely was. You have to look at the timing. November 1921. The war has been over for 3 years. The trauma is deep. France has lost a generation of men.
The whole country is shell-shocked.
Exactly. The public is exhausted. They are grieving. They want a distraction. They want a change of mood.
And here comes this Bluebird story. It has everything. Sex, death, mystery, money, and a villain who talks back.
It was the perfect soap opera. We mentioned the celebrities earlier. Kipling, Chevalier. It's hard to imagine that happening today in the same way.
I don't know.
You think it could?
Well, think about the O.J. Simpson trial. Think about the Johnny DePamber Heard trial. The courtroom as a celebrity event is very much alive today.
That's a fair point. A very fair point. The mechanics are the same, just the technology has changed. Landru was just the prototype.
And he played into it. He understood he was on stage.
He loved it.
How did he behave in court?
He was the star of his own show. The source mentions he would make these witty retorts to the prosecutor. He played to the gallery.
He treated it like a performance.
He did. There's that famous story where the courtroom was so crowded that a lady was standing, struggling to see. Landru actually stood up in the dock, the accused murderer, and offered her his seat.
You're kidding me.
He said, "If my seat is all right with you, madam."
That is incredibly dark humor.
Very dark.
Yeah.
But the crowd ate it up. They laughed. They applauded.
So they weren't seeing him as a monster in that moment. They saw him as an entertainer.
An entertainer, a rogue.
Yeah.
He received fan mail in prison. Marriage proposals.
Stop.
I'm serious. Women were writing to him, offering to marry him while he was on trial for killing women he promised to marry. He got gifts of tobacco and sweets.
It just defies all logic.
It does, unless you look at it through the lens of celebrity.
Yeah.
And then there's the cartoon, the famous cartoon about the foyer.
Okay, you have to explain that for the non-French speakers.
So in French, the word foyer has a double meaning. It means home or hearth, representing, domestic bliss.
Right.
But technically, it also means the stove or the furnace.
Ah, I see where this is going.
A newspaper ran a cartoon showing Landru saying, "A woman's place is in the foyer." It's this incredibly gruesome pun.
He is saying a woman's place is in the home, but also in the stove.
Exactly. It's horrific.
It's absolutely horrific.
It is. But it turned him into a pop culture icon.
Yeah.
It trivialized the horror. And this public obsession, it feels so voyeuristic.
And this is where we need to bring in that academic paper on Dostoevsky. Because it seems like Dostoevsky predicted this exact phenomenon decades before Landru.
He really did.
Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist, Crime and Punishment Dostoevsky.
The very same. The source discusses Dostoevsky's analysis of the boulevard press, what we would call the tabloids or yellow journalism today.
So, early clickbait.
Basically.
Yeah.
Dostoevsky noticed a shift in the 19th century. Newspapers started moving away from dry political reporting and started focusing on what he called the voyeuristic, the ephemeral, and the exotic.
How the other half lives combined with what goes on behind closed doors.
Exactly. The paper points to his novel The Devils. Sometimes it's translated as The Possessed, where the narrator acts very much like a tabloid editor.
How so?
He parades human transgression for the reader's amusement. The paper argues that the public uses these stories to peer into the private lives of others, to see the chaos that is usually hidden behind a respectable facade.
So the Landru trial wasn't really about justice for the crowd.
No. The source argues that for the crowd, it was about the thrill of the face divers' sensational news items. It trivialized the horror into gossip.
They weren't there to mourn the seamstress, Jean Couchet, or her son.
No, they were there to see the Bluebeard, the monster who makes jokes. It was a safe way to experience horror. You can look at the monster, shiver, and then go home to your safe bed.
Which brings us to the broader picture. Landru was 1921. But we have this other massive source, serial murder and media circuses, that tracks this phenomenon through the rest of the 20th century.
And it seems like the relationship between the media and the killer gets even more twisted as technology evolves.
It becomes a symbiosis.
That's the word the source uses. The thesis here is that the media and the killer have a mutually beneficial relationship.
Right. The media needs content. The old adage, if it bleeds, it leads. And the killer, so often, desires power and recognition.
And they learn how to use each other.
Let's talk about the manipulation aspect first. Because some killers explicitly use the media to terrorize or control an entire city. They aren't just passive subjects of the story, they are active directors.
The classic example provided in the source is the Axeman of New Orleans. This was right on the same time as Landru, actually 1918 to 1919.
I know the story. The letter from hell.
Yes, the ass man wrote a letter to the editor of the newspapers. He claimed to be a fell demon from the hottest hell, and he issued a command.
What was the command?
He said he was going to visit New Orleans on a specific Tuesday night at exactly 12:15 a.m., but he promised to spare any house where a jazz band was playing.
I am very fond of jazz music, he wrote. I remember that line.
Exactly. And what happened? On that Tuesday night, every single house in New Orleans was blasting jazz. The clubs were full, bands were playing on street corners.
The killer effectively conducted the entire city.
He did. He used the press to force the population to dance to his tune. It's pure psychological terrorism.
That is pure power.
It is. And we see echoes of this with the Zodiac Killer, sending cryptograms to the San Francisco Chronicle, or Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, writing to the columnist Jimmy Breslin.
They know the letter gets printed?
They know it terrifies the public. And they know it makes them a star. It validates their existence in some twisted way.
There is a disturbing detail in the source about a killer named Wesley Dodd. This is a much later case, but it shows the evolution of this.
Yes, Dodd was a child killer. The source notes that he would actually watch the TV news during the crimes or immediately after.
While it was happening.
He wanted to see if his abduction of the child had been reported yet. He later admitted to keeping all the newspaper articles about himself in a scrapbook.
So he was reliving it through the media coverage.
And validating himself. The media coverage proved he mattered. If he was on the news, he was significant.
But it's not just the killers manipulating the media. Sometimes the media is so aggressive that they actually wreck the police work. The source calls this media interference.
And this is a huge theme in the Serial Murder and Media Circuses book.
Mm-hmm.
The media frenzy can actively help the killer escape or force the police to make terrible mistakes.
The Andrew Cunanan case is a prime example of this. He was the guy who killed Gianni Versace in Miami, but he had been on a cross-country spree before that.
Right. There was a moment where police had him cornered, or at least they were tracking him. He was driving a victim's Lexus, and the police were tracking the car phone. This was 1997, so car phones were a thing.
Technology was different, but the tracking principle is the same.
Exactly. But here is the problem. The media found out, and they broadcast it. They reported on air. Police are tracking Cunan's car phone in the Lexus.
And Cunanan was listening.
He was hiding out in a houseboat, listening to the radio. He heard the report. So what did he do?
Got rid of the phone.
Ripped the phone out of the car and destroyed it. He fled. The trail went cold. That one news report extended the manhunt and arguably put more people at risk.
That is infuriating. The need for the scoop compromised the safety of the public.
It gets worse. In the Hillside Strangler case in Los Angeles, the reporters were following the detectives so closely, literally tailing their unmarked cars, that the police couldn't do their jobs.
They couldn't do any surveillance.
None. The source mentions that the police had to schedule fake press conferences just to draw the reporters away so the real detectives could slip out the back and actually investigate.
They had to create a decoy for the media just to do police work. That's insane.
And in the Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka case in Canada, the Ken and Barbie killers, the media followed the police to a sensitive surveillance site.
So their cover was blown.
Completely blown. The police were forced to arrest Bernardo prematurely. They weren't fully ready. They didn't have all the evidence lined up, but they had no choice because the press fans were there.
It seems like the competition for the scoop just completely overrides any sense of public safety or responsibility.
And checkbook journalism is the other side of that coin, the commodification of the crime itself. This is where people start selling their stories or even evidence for cash.
This is where it gets really grimy.
In the Jeffrey Dahmer case, the source describes a media zone around his apartment building in Milwaukee. It was absolute chaos.
What's going on?
You had neighbors selling interviews for cash. You had a janitor who stole confidential files from the district attorney's office to sell to the New York Times.
Unbelievable. And what about the victims' families?
They were harassed relentlessly. There's a horrific detail about reporters stepping on the furniture in a victim's mother's house, breaking framed photos, just trying to get a shot of her grief.
That's awful.
In the Cunan case, friends and former roommates were selling photos of him for thousands and thousands of dollars. One guy got $85,000 for a photo of Cunan.
It turns everyone into a profiteer of tragedy.
And it contributes to the celebration of the killer. We know Manson, we know Dahmer, we know Landru. Do we know the names of their victims?
Rarely. I remember Jean Couchet because we just talked about her, but in a week, I'll probably only remember Landru. And that's the problem.
That is the distortion the media circus creates. The killer becomes the protagonist. The victim becomes a prop in their story.
So is it ever a good thing? I mean, we have to ask, does the media ever actually help catch the bad guy? We have to be fair here.
It does, and we have to acknowledge that. The source calls it the wanted poster effect.
Right. If you plaster a face everywhere, on every TV screen, someone is bound to see it.
The case of Dorothea Puente is a great example. She was a landlady in Sacramento who was killing her elderly tenants to cash their Social Security checks.
A modern-day Landru, really. The financial motive, the vulnerable victim.
Very similar MO. She went on the run when the police discovered the bodies buried in her yard.
And the media covered it heavily.
They did. A man in a bar in Los Angeles recognized her because he had seen a report on the TV news just moments before. He called the police. She was caught.
So without that mass media reach.
She might have disappeared and killed again. So yes, it can absolutely help.
So it's a double-edged sword. A very sharp one.
Completely. It can solve crimes, but it can also compromise them. There's a technical concept the source talks about called polygraph keys or holdback evidence that is really important here.
Okay, unpack that for us. What is that?
When police investigate a murder, they hold back specific, gruesome details from the public. Maybe it's the way a particular knot was tied or a specific object left at the scene or something written on a wall.
Details only the killer would know.
Exactly. These are keys. If a suspect mentions them during an interrogation, the police know they are guilty because only the killer and the police would know that detail.
But if the media leaks those details,
the key is useless. In the Manson case, for example, there was writing in blood at the crime scene, the word pig on the door. The police wanted to keep the specific word secret to verify confessions.
but it got out.
The media leaked it almost immediately.
Yeah.
And once it's in the paper, any false confessor, any crank, can call in and claim they did it, and they have the details to prove it. It muddies the water and wastes an incredible amount of police time.
It sounds like we haven't learned very much since 1921.
In many ways, we've just amplified the same dynamics. Landru was the prototype. He showed that a killer could be a celebrity, that a trial could be theater, the boulevard press that Dostoevsky warned about.
That is just the internet now.
That is Twitter, or X. That is true crime TikTok. That's Reddit. We are currently living in the boulevard world.
We consume crime as content.
We do. We binge-watch series about serial killers. We listen to podcasts about murder. We discuss the details of trials on social media as if we're dissecting a TV show. We are the spectators on the Landru special train.
So when we click on that sensational headline or when we tune in to the latest documentary about a gruesome murder,
We have to ask ourselves, are we the audience in the Versailles courtroom? Are we laughing at Landru's jokes while ignoring the smoke from the chimney?
that is a heavy question.
It is. And I want to leave you with one final thought, a story from the Landru trial that sums this whole dynamic up perfectly. It's a moment of pure theater, but it reveals the absolute truth of the situation.
Go for it.
So, Vincent de Moura Jaffrey was Landru's defense lawyer. He was a brilliant orator, a true celebrity lawyer of his time. In his closing argument, he tried a desperate trick.
What did he do?
He knew the prosecution had no bodies, only the teeth and the bone debris. So he paused in his speech, and he pointed dramatically to the large double doors at the back of the courtroom.
Okay, he's setting a scene.
He shouted to the jury, "You say these women are dead. Look, they are standing there right now waiting to enter."
And did everyone look?
Everyone. The jury, the judge, the spectators in the gallery, the journalists. Every single head in that room turned to the doors, holding their breath, expecting to see the victims walk in alive.
But they didn't. Of course they didn't.
Of course not. The doors remained closed. But the lawyer turned back to the jury and argued, "You see, you looked. That means you have a doubt. If you were certain they were dead, you wouldn't have turned your heads. You looked because you weren't sure."
That is brilliant lawyering.
It was. It almost worked. But the prosecutor, a man named Godfroy, stood up immediately after, and he said, "You were right, Maitre. Everyone looked. But there was one person in this courtroom who did not turn his head.
Landru.
Landru himself did not turn. He didn't look at the doors, and why would he?
Because he knew they were there.
He knew they were in the stove.
Chilling.
But here is the question for us, the listeners, the consumers of this theater of crime. When we look at these stories, do we look because we hope for justice? Or do we look because we want to see the monster? Do we turn our heads for the victim or for the show?
I think I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Stay curious and maybe look away once in a while.